Morning. Today I'm going to talk about Magna Carta. Magna Carta means the Great Charter, a charter about rights and duties on the part of the king and also the rights on the part of the civilians. So it was produced in England during the time of King John. So when I was reading Magna Carta, immediately my mind remembered Genesis chapter 1 and 2, in which God gives them Magna Carta, the great charter to humans. After creating humans, God is giving instructions, rights, duties. So I would call Genesis chapter 1 and 2 the Magna Carta, the great charter given by God, not by King John. This Magna Carta given to not only humans, to animals and plants, also to the elements of the earth, to the whole of creation. So this great charter is very important. We need to understand about it. In order to understand, we have to read chapter 1 and 2 very carefully. Anyway, first, I would explain the background in which the Magna Carta of King John came to existence. Magna Carta means, in Latin, great charter. King John is known to literature a classic bad king, and indeed he was. The brother of Richard I, he was conceited and moody and prone to childish rages, probably the result of doting parents. He was known as the Landless or Lackland because he was born late and his father had already willed everything to his other children. As King John made up his lack by taking money from the royal treasury for his own use. Unfortunately, he lost most of England's possessions in France and became embroiled in intrigue, even facing excommunication from the Pope. He overtaxed and overrode the local aristocrats. Clearly, he was not an ideal king. Ultimately, the English barons presented him with the document, the famous Magna Carta. This forced the king to observe ancient law and respect the rights of barons, to resist abuses of their privileges by the king. But because of his tyrannical rule, England and the rest of the world benefited. The English nobility forced him to sign Magna Carta, a document that guaranteed them certain political liberties and which became the basis for the freedoms we enjoy today. John caved in to their demands and signed the document they gave him, Magna Carta Libertatum, which later great politicians described as the Bible of the Constitution. Magna Carta is the mother of such documents as the US Constitution. The key is that it limits the role of absolute kings like John, and it sets forth the basis of constitutional liberties. It establishes the idea that individuals have natural rights. It establishes the rule of law. So the real importance of Magna Carta lies in its being first a beginning. It was copied, studied, and added to over the years, and it culminated in the liberties many enjoy today. In fact, it was the beginning of the long history whereby the English kings gave up some of their royal powers, but in return got to remain on the throne. In addition, the Magna Carta guaranteed fair trials, proportionate punishment, and certain feudal rights. It was the basis of democratic liberty that culminated centuries later in the world's constitutions and the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. As for King John, he died of dysentery at the age of 48 while seeking revenge against the English barons for forcing him to sign the Magna Carta. We have hundreds of Johns in the form of nations who systematically plunder, abuse the natural resources which belong to all, including yet to be born. Urgently, we need a Magna Carta which could stop the illegal plunder and limit the role of absolute governments, some of whom feel that they are above the law, and somehow steer them to the stewardship or sustainable development. Bible can be called Magna Carta, especially Genesis chapter 1 and 2. This is the Magna Carta given to our fathers and to their great-grandfathers. This will be the Magna Carta given to our children and to their great-grandchildren. This is given by God Himself, and it has to be reminded to every generation. Here is the essence of Magna Carta given by God. God blessed them, and God said, "Unto them be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth." This passage from the Bible portrays the Creator, a generous God. Some have criticized Genesis of an encouraging and exploitive attitude toward the ecology and environment. But I don't think it's true if we look carefully the two divine commands that define human beings in Genesis. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. The first divine command tells human beings to continue in existence by procreation. That is to accept the gift of life and cooperate with God for the sake of the next generation. And the second command, subdue the earth, does not give permission to exploit the environment. It means rather that God has given to each nation a defined territory from which they are to draw their sustenance. Each nation must therefore take their land or territory, which in that thoroughly agrarian society was the source of life. God wishes each nation to have enough to flourish. These two examples from the early chapters of Genesis suffice to show us how profound and how positive is the biblical picture of human beings and society. They show us a generous God and a dignified and a treasured human race.